So my goal really is to build innovation capability in organizations. My question today has to do with, what if we could build some of these innovation-driving capabilities that Edison used into our organizations today? What if we could use a process that he described as midnight lunch in our efforts as teams, in our efforts as divisions and organizations, schools, you name it. Midnight lunch took place after hours when Edison would return to the laboratory unannounced at about 7 o'clock. So no one knew if he was going to come, not come after hours. But on those days that he did come, what he would do is arrive at the laboratory and check on his experiments. He had many experiments that were running over multi-day cycles, and sometimes he just wanted to see how they were doing. So he'd arrive at the laboratory, he'd check at his workstation and so on, and then he would talk to the other people who were staying late as well. And this might be some 10, 12 folks on any given evening, and he would go and talk with them and ask to see their notebooks. He would have them each exchange notebooks with each other and learn about the different types of experiments that were being run in the laboratory side by side. These are sound experiments, electricity experiments, experiments in motion. Edison invented motion pictures, the storage battery. So there are many different types of expertise sitting side by side. And by having people exchange and create dialogue, they were able to see patterns. They were able to offer insights into each other's work and create a real level of engagement and excitement. So they would do this for about 2 hours, and then Edison would order in food from a local tavern, and they'd have sandwiches and beverages. They'd kick back, tell stories, sing songs, I'm not kidding, and smoke cigars for about an hour. And in this time, they got to know each other as people. So there was a social exchange. This is a very interesting way of creating trust and creating connection. After about an hour, they'd go back to work and roll up their sleeves once again and continue their experiments and dialogue. So they'd kick off at about midnight. Some people would stay, some people would go back home, but hence the name Midnight Lunch. Edison began his invention and innovation process with questions. He did not begin with solutions. He tried this early in his career. His very first patented invention, which came out when he was 22, a dream fulfilled for him, failed because he went right into his idea and right into launch without looking at customer needs. And he realized that he didn't ask enough questions about what customers wanted or what was possible. So this changed his entire way of inventing. And he began all of his exercises with questions. Part of what I've written about is what I describe as the 5 competencies of innovation that Edison used over and over again over the course of his career. And the very first of these 5 competencies is what I describe as a solution-centered mindset. This is the belief that a solution is out there, that by being optimistic and positive, that no matter what happens, you are going to be able to make progress and find an answer. So Edison would begin his process by reading. We heard one of the speakers this afternoon talk about reading and the importance of that. Edison did not just read one area of endeavor related to his experiments, he read broadly. So if any of you can begin preparing your minds to be innovators, read broadly. One of the very first steps that you can take. A second, kaleidoscopic thinking. This is the second competency of innovation. Edison had an extraordinary ability to look at problems from multiple angles. A lot of times we put blinders on and we see things only from our perspective. Edison was able to turn and shift constantly to examine problems in multiple ways. One of the ways he did this was to exercise some of what we're doing today, the what-if muscle, which is almost like a science fiction building muscle. What is possible? What are the biggest, vast, most crazy expanses of ideas that we could come up with? Edison did that routinely, and he wrote some of these ideas down in his notebooks. The third competency of innovation, full spectrum engagement. I think this is actually one of the most interesting areas of discussion today. Part of what Edison was very good at doing was navigating a spectrum of opposites. He was excellent at dealing with complexity, but also as expressing complex ideas in simple terms. He was very good at being serious in the lab, but he could also be playful. So think about what your navigation spectrum is. Do you get stopped when you experience failure? Or are you able to push beyond that and move towards success? These are some of the mental toughness muscles that we have to continue to exercise. Happiness is fantastic. It's excellent. We all want to be there. I think that the pursuit of happiness actually involves the ability to navigate these opposites. Now, Edison gives us a lot of tools on how we can do that. Fourth competency of innovation, mastermind collaboration. I mentioned a moment ago that Edison really worked in teams. And for him, the unit of innovation was the small team. Specifically, generally, teams of 2 to 8 people. Once you get over 8 people, and some of you may have experienced this even in your tables today, once you get over 8 people, it gets very hard to communicate. There's complexity that kind of gets built into the system that is unhelpful. So Edison created this collegial environment where there were small teams operating. They could link and connect like Lego blocks at the drop of a hat. Because he had created a collegial environment, he was able to scale projects very readily this way. So this notion of collaboration is actually very fascinating for us today in a world of virtual systems, virtual technologies, and smart devices. When we collaborate with someone, we may not see them for months at a time. They may just be someone on a telepresence monitor. They may be someone in a Skype call. So how do you create that sense of collegiality and collaboration in a very real sense? Edison would really have a lot to offer us here. A few final thoughts. The fifth competency of innovation is what I call super value creation. And this is really where Edison is so different from many of the other inventors and innovators that we can think about. As a serial innovator, he created over $500 billion in market value by the time of his death. That was 3% of global GDP. So he had an incredible skill when it came to creating products and services that led people out into new ways of behaving, new ways of connecting, new ways of functioning in their daily lives. Part of how he did this was to monitor trends. He read the newspaper every day. He looked at trends. What was happening around him? Where could a market move? Where could a particular scientific capability go if he were to push it to a new height or to a new level? Innovation capability is probably the single most important thing that we can bring to our workforce. America is the innovating nation of the world. This is our core competence. This is how we distinguish ourselves in the global economy. So for us to be focusing on innovation is very central not only to our individual capability and how we can maximize our potential as individuals, but how we can maximize our potential as a nation. So I believe what we can do is claim this. We claim innovation as the driving force of our economy. And if we can claim that, then we can move and create agility in our programs of education, in our technology sector, in so many of the ways that affect our daily lives. If there's anything that I could leave you with today, it would be, if there is something that you want to pursue, if you want to be a generation changer, as one of the speakers this afternoon described, you've got to claim that. You've got to say, this is what I'm going to do. And you put a flag in the ground and move toward that. Complaining will not get you to claiming. Innovation capability is one of the most important things that we can develop, and I hope all of you will think about Edison as a driver of your ability to collaborate, your ability to solve problems in unique ways, and to go forth and innovate. Thank you so much.